Hello, my name's Rick Bradford. I'm a trustee of the Welsh charity Both Parents Mater Cymru, from which charity the subjects of this study were taken. The title is Loneliness and Degraded Wellbeing of Separated Fathers in Wales and their association with partner abuse and other independent variables. The primary role of the charity is to assist non-resident parents after parental separation, generally with issues over child contact. 95% of service users are male. The objective was to quantify the associations of loneliness and well-being with domestic abuse and other independent variables within this cohort of separated fathers. Associations were explored using correlations and multivariate linear regressions. The participants were all male service users, and all those service users registering with the charity over an 18-month period for whom the required data had been obtained. So N is 291. Domestic abuse was measured using the Safe Lives Domestic Violence Risk Identification Checklist, or RIC, which scores from 0 to 24. The mental well-being measure used was the shorter Warwick-Edinburgh scale, which is a 5-point Likert scale with 7 questions, scoring from 7 to 35, where high scores are good well-being. The measure used for social and emotional isolation, henceforth loneliness, was the longer de Jong-Gerveld scale, which again is a 5-point Likert scale with 11 questions and scored in such a way that the score is between 0 and 11, with high scores being severe loneliness. The characteristics of the input data, first of all, mental well-being, the Warwick-Edinburgh scale. The black line here is a normal fit to a large sample of the general population for comparison purposes. The blue squares are the data from the study, and the blue dotted line is the best log normal fit to that data. So as you can see at a glance, the well-being is severely skewed to low values, particularly at the lowest values where in general population, that severity of degraded well-being is extremely rare, but is significantly represented in this population. Loneliness, the orange or brown bars are the data from the study. This is percentage of the candidates scoring in these ranges. And remember, high scores for loneliness are degraded, severe loneliness. In the blue bars are the general population. So you can see with the general population, you've got the mode of the distribution. By far the most common loneliness is a very low level of loneliness, decreasing as you go up the loneliness severity. But with the service users of the charity, it's the other way around. And in particular, the score of 11, the highest level of loneliness, is the most common in this population. Domestic abuse, all this data is data from the service users of the charity. The blue bars are all the data, and the orange or brown bars are the data where the service user initially did not identify as being a victim of domestic abuse. Multivariate linear regressions were done in 2 passes. First of all, the dependent variables were the well-being and loneliness data, and the independent variables were the domestic abuse RIC score plus 7 other independent variables. And these are the other 7 variables: low income, allegations of domestic violence against the client's own self-identification of the need for emotional support, whether social services were involved at the time of registration, whether mediation had been refused by the partner, whether the client alleges that the child in question is at risk from the partner, the ex-partner, or a third party, and whether the client self-identifies as having a disability, either physical or mental. And the result in terms of correlations was that of the 8 independent variables, the one variable that correlated consistently most strongly with the well-being and loneliness data was the domestic abuse RIC score. So for loneliness, the Pearson correlation was 0.25, and for well-being minus 0.3, and both highly significant according to the p-value. There were other significant correlations as measured by the p-value, namely income, allegations against the client, and refusal of mediation, but none was greater than 0.2. The regressions, multivariate regressions, bore out that conclusion. Of the 8 independent variables, the regression B coefficients were very clearly the largest for the domestic abuse RIC score. For loneliness, 2.65, and for well-being, -5. Again, there were 2 other variables that were significant in the regression, income and mediation, similar to the correlation, but with B coefficients that were substantially smaller than that for the RIC score. The obvious thing to look at next, given that the RIC had turned out to be the most significant association, and given that that consists of 24 separate questions, was to ask what questions were dominating that result. I've ruled out question 7 on the RIC because question 7 relates to conflict over child contact, and our sample population is self-selected as being men that have that difficulty almost entirely. So it's no surprise that that was the most common question answered in the affirmative, but really that means nothing. Other than that question, the top scoring question was question 12, which is this: does the other party try to control everything you do, and/or are they excessively jealous? And that was answered in the affirmative in 88% of cases, very, very large proportion of cases. I then proceeded to do another round of multivariate linear regressions, this time with the independent variables being the 24 separate RIC questions, to see which questions came out most significant based on regression. And the answer is question 4, consistently, easily the most significant for both loneliness and degraded well-being. And question 4 is this: do you feel isolated from family and friends? No surprise, I suppose, that that is most strongly associated with the de Jong-Gerveld measure of loneliness, because the isolation is exactly what that is supposed to be measuring. Correlation with well-being, not quite so obvious. So the conclusions are that the dominant associations of loneliness and degraded well-being in this cohort of separated fathers out of 8 independent variables was victimization by domestic abuse as measured by the Safe Lives RIC. The dominant RIC question was question 12, and the RIC question most strongly associated with loneliness and well-being via regression was question 4. And both those questions are indicative of coercive control. Thank you very much.